At Quite Well Hall, everything is not quite well, as members of the Dequetteville family are being murdered by a decapitated ghost. Where's Ichabod Crane where you need him? We're talking headless horsemen.
The history of the English Civil Wars.
And dysfunctional families. Again. In this episode of...
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about The Dark Rider, the first episode of the 15th series. It originally aired February 1st, 2012. It was directed by Alex Pillay and written by Michael Aitkins. Let's get our pointer fingers ready.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murder. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
So, what happened? Man fell from the roof of Quite Well Hall. What was he doing on the roof in the middle of the night? Well, the only witness, Toby de Catville, said he saw a grey horse riding away just after the old man fell. And who was out riding in the middle of the night in a very aggressive electrical storm? Don't know, sir, but apparently he had no head. I beg your pardon? Witness said the horse rider had no head. Drunk or stoned? I was on duty, sir.
It's a stormy night at Quite Well Hall, and Bentham de Quetteville is awakened by a flag coming loose on the roof. So like any reasonable homeowner, he climbs up there to get it. But when he looks down, he sees a headless horseman pointing up at him, scaring him so badly he falls from the roof. At that moment, his nephew Toby takes his dog for a walk and sees the headless rider and his uncle on the ground. Just before he dies, Bentham's final words are, "Geoffrey," and not, "Get an ambulance." The next morning, DCI John Barnaby and DS Ben Jones head over to investigate. The hall is a popular tourist spot, and even death doesn't stop tourism. It also doesn't stop the de Quettevilles from preparing for the annual reenactment of the English Civil War Battle of Naseby that occurred nearby in the 1600s. Although the Roundheads won the actual battle, the family are royalist sympathizers and use their money to rewrite history and win every year. The de Quettevilles are a strange lot. Toby's parents are tough and cutting Izzy and cowardly, anxious Ludo. Julian is Toby's twin brother, a complete alpha male to Toby's complete beta cuck.
Is this the Joe Rogan show?
I mean, how else would you describe him?
That is true.
Anyways, Julian's wife Diana is a true believer in having lots of money and status, and Toby's son Simon has been mute since witnessing his mother's death 5 years previously. As Jones Grands puts it, the family are all a bunch of inbred nuts who spent too much time marrying their cousins. Which seems pretty judgy, considering that could describe most of Midsomer. The only real outsider is Toby's second wife, Betty. She's the real boss, who pretty much runs the whole hall and is quite happy that Toby loves her just like a great big Labrador. None of them are real broken up over Bentham's death, as he was a crank who would spit at the tourists and also smelled like cabbage. They also say they don't know who Geoffrey is, a statement they all have to take back almost immediately, because just then Barnaby finds a priest hole hidden behind a bookshelf, and inside are a lot of weapons and a painting of a headless horseman. It's a portrait of Geoffrey de Quetteville, who had his head blown off in the Battle of Naseby. Family has a legend that Geoffrey's ghost rides the grounds and that if he points at you, you're gonna die soon. Coroner Kate Wilding informs the detectives that Bentham's death is a heart attack, so not a murder. But Barnaby is going to investigate anyways, because it's a slow week, I guess. The de Quetteville's neighbors are the wealthy Harry and Sasha Fleetwood, who are very, very tired of their neighbors and their control over the reenactment. When Julian and Toby visit them to discuss the reenactment, Sasha challenges Julian to a wager. If the Roundheads win the reenactment this year, the Fleetwoods will get Longmeadow, which is hall adjacent. Julian accepts, confident in his victory, but Sasha has a plan. She goes to local stable owner Amanda Harding with a deal. If she and all the other local stable owners refuse to provide the de Quettevilles with horses the day of the reenactment, they will all finally be free of them and get this big old bag of money. No horses, no de Quetteville victory. At the Barnaby home, Sarah informs her husband that as the vice president of the local historical society, she will lead the reenactment so it will happen the proper, accurate way. John is a little concerned that she will be at his crime scene, but she tells him that it's a small community and their paths will cross, so suck it up, Buttercup. I might be paraphrasing. Back at the hall, Toby informs Betty about the pet, and she is not thrilled because she knows how Sasha operates. While riding in his horse and carriage, Julian sees the ghost of Jeffrey pointing at him. He chases after him. Them. It? He loses the ghost, but he walks right into a trap. Someone cuts a rope, sending a massive log straight into Julian's chest, killing him. This is a loss the family does care about, and they are consumed in grief, even with Betty pushing them to get moving, otherwise they will lose the meadow. The detectives retrace Julian's steps and find the scene of the crime. They are thinking that two people might be involved. One is the writer, and the other is the killer. Julian had plenty of enemies and was notorious for sleeping around. Izzy explains that the men of the family are lacking moral fiber. Ludo's a coward. Toby is weak. Julian was a real man, but also kind of garbage. Only the women in the family have any balls. That's her, not me. With Bentham and Julian dead, Toby is now the next in line of succession. Diana never had a child with Julian, so she's kind of on the outs of the family. Betty admits that when she came 6 years ago to the hall, she found the painting and began pumping up the ghost stories to increase tourism. She never arranged any sightings. She says the family is just super suggestible. But someone seems to be riding around as a headless ghost because that night Ludo looks out the window and sees the writer pointing at him. Tourist info this week. Whitewell Hall has been the home of the Duquetteville family for generations. It is a popular tourist spot, especially during the annual reenactment of the Battle of Naseby. Reenactment might not be accurate, no refunds. Located nearby is the quiet and secluded Badger's Mill, where you can go to get away from it all because apparently no one ever goes by there ever. So, they just let tourists run around a potential crime scene?
Whatever. But standing in for Quitewell Hall is the impressive Nebworth House in Hertfordshire. Originally built around the late 15th century, its current Gothic Tudor exterior dates from the 1840s. Its most famous resident was the author Edward Bulwer Lytton, famous for the "It was a dark and stormy night" opening line, which is appropriate for the episode opening storm. They have an annual rock festival, and the exteriors have been used in many films and television shows, including The Great Muppet Caper, The King's Speech, and the greatest Eurovision movie of all time, Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. And yes, you can get married there.
What's the second greatest Eurovision song movie?
I have no idea.
So, you can't do anything in this episode without first, let's just talk about the Duquettevilles. And first point about them, terrible name. Hard to spell, hard to say. Michael Aikens, you're a jerk.
I think it gives the implication that they are very old Norman family. They came over with William the Conqueror.
Hard to spell, hard to say. Another incredibly dysfunctional, wealthy family in Midsomer. The men are scoundrels or neurotics, and the women are blunt schemers, I guess you could say for a bunch of them.
Pretty much true. There's a lot of inbreeding that's been going on in that family.
You know, God bless Jones Grand. It was a fairly accurate line. Do you think we should have at some point the most dysfunctional family in Midsomer contest?
Oh, definitely. Most definitely.
You got the Duquettevilles. You got that. What was that? That rich family with the priest. We did the episode. It was like they kept having tea every time someone died.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the upper lower thing.
Yeah. The Tale of Two Hamlets. Yeah.
That's it, folks. These episodes blend together after a while. There's a lot of messed up families.
Most of them are very wealthy.
Yeah. And I guess that just goes back to what Grant said. Too much inbreeding. Do you think it's weird that they keep having horses around since so many people in that family die around horses?
You can't get between a wealthy English person and their horse. No matter how many people die.
5 out of the 6 deaths mentioned in this episode occur around horses.
Yeah.
I like that, although Izzy is the one who's she seems to have a decent head on her shoulders, Betty is the only one with any real sense.
Yeah. To be honest, I think they would have lost the hall years ago without Betty.
They clearly just lack any kind of common sense or Yeah, even that idea, like, we're just going to bet the meadow. Why would you bet the meadow? Like,
Yeah.
that's the dumbest thing in the world, especially considering you know who this woman is.
Yeah. Yeah. That was well, Julian may be high on braggadocio, but not big on smarts.
It was a joke saying, like, he's the alpha male and Toby is like a beta cuck, but really, he is that sort of like alpha male, like, oh, little woman can't beat me. And he clearly was outthought. He would have been out,
Yeah.
even if he hadn't died, he would have been outthought.
Yeah. It's kind of the very stereotypical alpha male thing where they're big on brawn and and words and small on everything else, shall we say.
Still, some great lines. Izzy had some great lines in this episode, calling Julian a mad shagger whose seed fell on stony ground.
Yeah.
Toby is a big drip, wet as a flannel. Only the women have balls.
She does get in some great lines, and the actress just has so much fun with them.
I liked Izzy in this one. She's a hoot.
Yeah.
Why do you think Bentham climbed to the roof to fix the flag in the middle of the night in an electrical storm?
Not very smart. Again, just low on brains.
Hey, just wait till the morning? Are you that light a sleeper?
Yeah. What I loved was that as he was falling, he still holds onto the flag so that they have that lovely shot of the flag rippling in the wind as he falls.
What I loved was when Toby sees the body, has like one of the most awkward runs I've ever seen filmed. It's like kind of bow-legged, kind of slow skipping. It's beautifully awkward.
The legacy of weird runners in Midsomer.
You can't talk about this episode, of course, without talking about the Dark Rider. By the way, we've talked before about Scooby Doo plots in this episode. This is literally a Scooby Doo plot. It is an episode called The Headless Horseman of Halloween. Someone is dressing up as a headless horseman to scare people away.
You know, Scooby Doo did everything, kind of like The Simpsons.
But it does kind of bring up that, again, sort of a common theme with ghost stories in this episode, something that Tom Barnaby said. People love to be scared.
Yeah. And Betty stokes those stories. She realizes a good gimmick when she sees one.
Oh, yeah. It's great. I'd go.
Yeah.
Even if it meant he was going to point at me.
Yeah.
That said, why would anyone paint a portrait of a guy with no head? Like, we want this gentleman to live forever in our memory. Forget the head.
Yeah. Well, just a little bit of background on Headless Horseman legends. Not enough for a whole history corner, but the concept dates back to the Middle Ages in Ireland, Scotland, and Germany. In Ireland, he is called Dullahan, which means dark man, or Ken Ceann, which means without a head. Stereotypically, he rides a black horse and carries his head under his arm or held up high. He then calls out a name and the person dies. In German folklore, the horseman killed his victims simply by touching them. Now, American author Washington Irving traveled to Europe in 1815 and very likely came across these legends that inspired his classic story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Published in 1820, it's the story of Ichabod Crane being pursued by and scared out of town by a headless horseman that is supposed to be the ghost of a Hessian soldier. By the end of the story, it is implied that the ghost was actually Brom Bones, who was competing with Ichabod for the affections of Katrina and who hated nerds. Much like our horseman, it is all for love. The story has become a Halloween staple and has been adapted for film and television.
Oh, so is that our history corner? No other history corner this week?
No. We have a history corner.
Oh, okay. Well, you should do it then.
I guess we should. So the history corner this time is a very, very condensed and simplified version of the English Civil War. Or Civil Wars, depending on who's talking about. There were 3 civil wars that took place between 1642 and 1651 between the Royalists, who backed King Charles I, and the Parliamentarians. The Royalists were also called Cavaliers, and the Parliamentarians were known as Roundheads, as they cut their hair short. The Civil Wars were part of the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which started in 1639 and lasted 2 years after the Third Civil War ended. The Three Kingdoms were the kingdoms of England, Ireland, and Scotland. Nominally, they were independent kingdoms, with Ireland being created as a kingdom by Henry VIII, with himself as king, of course. The Scottish crown was independent of the English crown until the ascension of James VI of Scotland to the throne of England after the death of his first cousin, twice removed, Elizabeth I. Each had a separate parliament, and each had religious struggles that bled over into the political realm. King Charles had dissolved his third English parliament in 1629 and embarked on a period of personal rule, also known as the 11 Years' Tyranny. By avoiding war, Charles could also avoid convening Parliament to raise funds, as it was the only body that could impose taxes. The Bishops' Wars of 1639 and 1640 started when Charles I tried to impose uniformity between the Church of Scotland and the Church of England. The predominantly Presbyterian Scots objected strongly, and Charles sent an ill-trained and poorly equipped army to subdue the rebellion. It did not go well for him. Meanwhile, in Ireland, things weren't going much better. Charles's Lord Deputy in Ireland, Thomas Wentworth, had alienated both the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland, taking property from established landowners and continuing the establishment of the notorious plantation system. Violence ensued. Charles realized that he needed to summon Parliament to raise funds to put down these rebellions. However, once seated, Parliament was more interested in addressing grievances against Charles's rule than in granting him funds. So in 3 weeks, Charles dissolved this Parliament, and it came to be known as the Short Parliament. Without funds, Charles once again lost to the Scots and was once again forced to summon Parliament. This Parliament passed a rule that could only be dissolved by the agreement of its members. This particular Parliament, summoned in November of 1640, would last until 1660 and would be given the name the Long Parliament. There were, however, purges during the Civil War that led to a rump Parliament that was loyal to the new model army, more about that later, and the Parliament wasn't continuously in session. Another revolt in Ireland in October the following year led to a clash between the king and Parliament over who controlled the army. Parliament passed the Grand Remonstrance with a long list of royal misdeeds and proposed solutions, which Charles rejected, of course. In addition to control of the army, many in Parliament who were Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England. Charles ordered his Attorney General to bring charges of treason against 2 members of the House of Lords and 5 members of the House of Commons, a sign to many that Charles intended to dissolve Parliament. Charles then made the mistake of leaving London, giving Parliament a distinct tactical and financial advantage. They declared that all laws they passed were valid without the king's signature. Charles declared Parliament in rebellion. What followed next was a series of 3 civil wars. Neither side gained the upper hand until the Battle of Marston Moor in July of 1644. This was a decisive Roundhead victory. Parliament then authorized the restructuring of the army into what was later called the New Model Army, the first attempt at a standing army rather than militias that could be called up. It had larger regiments and fewer commanders, and members of Parliament could not serve in it. Commanded by Sir Thomas Fairfax and Oliver Cromwell, it soundly defeated the Royalists at the Battle of Naseby in June 1645. This effectively ended Charles's chance of victory, though a second civil war broke out in 1648, with the Scots breaking away from Parliament and now supporting Charles in exchange for religious concessions. Charles eventually was captured and put on trial for treason and executed in 1649. A commonwealth was established, and Oliver Cromwell became Lord Protector. The Third Civil War took place mainly in Scotland and Ireland, with the latter being particularly brutally suppressed. It ended when Charles's son, also named Charles and who had been crowned King of Scotland, fled to France after his defeat at the Battle of Worcester in 1651. Cromwell died in 1658 and was succeeded by his son Richard, who lasted less than a year before the restoration of the Stuart monarchy under Charles II. And now we have Charles III. We're going to mix things up a little bit this time, Eric, and start with our return visitors. William Gaunt played Scaredy Cat Ludo de Quetteville. We discussed him when we talked about The Maid in Splendor, where he played Michael Bannerman. He's been acting since the 50s and got his big break as a superpowered spy in The Champions. He also had recurring roles in Sergeant Cork, Foundation, The Jury, No Place Like Home, and Next of Kin. Most recently appeared in a film performance of The Tragedy of Macbeth, playing Duncan. According to IMDb, his trademark is his piercing blue eyes, especially when younger. Sorry, older version. Eleanor Braun played Mother of the Year, Izzy de Quetteville. She also appears in The Miniature Murders. She attended Newnham College, Cambridge, which she later described as 3 years of unparalleled pampering and privilege. Sounds pretty sweet if you ask me. However, it was at this time she joined the famous Cambridge Footlights Review, making her one of the first women to do so. Up until then, it had been an all-male review with drag. She's gone on to appear in a number of films including Help, Women in Love, Bedazzled, Two for the Road, The Secret Policeman's Ball, Little Dorrit, and Absolutely Fabulous playing Patsy's mom. Two fun facts: her casting in Help apparently inspired Paul McCartney when he wrote the song Eleanor Rigby. Yes, it is named after her. She also was chosen as the voice of British Telecom back in the 80s, and you still might be able to hear her tell you to grow some balls! I mean, tell you that you dialed the wrong number. In an episode that was overflowing with extras, we wanted to recognize a few special background actors that have appeared in multiple episodes of Midsomer Murders, doing the Lord's work of making the world seem fully realized. There's too many to go into full detail for each one, but here's to you, Anthony Farrelly, Jude Smith, Nick Thomas Webster, Dave Galt, Martin Mager, and Julie Volano. And of course, this episode included an appearance by Mayor of Midsomer, Chris Wilson. We are still on our mission to have Chris Wilson on our show, so Chris, if you can hear us, come talk to us. So where did all those 17th century soldiers come from? About 200 members of the reenactment group The Sealed Knot showed up to reenact the Battle of Naseby. They are a historical association and charity that stages reenactments of battles from the English Civil Wars. The name of the group comes from a royalist secret society of the time. With several thousand members, it is the largest reenactment society in Europe. They also had the honor of being parodied as the Peeled Nuts by Terry Pratchett in his Discworld novels.
I gotta say, seeing this episode, and we have commented so many times about the lack of background extras on Midsomer, to see this rich, full two army, plus all the people watching, plus all the people I was like, they must have not hired a few extra actors.
They probably put out a call for people to come watch this rather well-known reenactment group do this battle.
Probably.
Yeah.
But that does bring us to the regular cast highlights, and we got some great ones. We have Raquel Cassidy, who played Tarty widow Diana de Quetteville. She studied modern languages at Girton College and then worked towards a PhD in biological anthropology before giving it all up for the life of an actor. Her first on-screen role was in the miniseries Killer Net, then went on to appear in Teachers, The Worst Week of My Life, Party Animals, Lead Balloon, and Moving Wallpaper. In 2013, she snagged the role she is most well known for, Lady's Maid Phyllis Baxter on the hit show Downton Abbey. She would go on to be in the final 3 seasons of the show, as well as both feature films. Most recently, she's been in The Worst Witch and The Good Karma Hospital.
She's funny in The Worst Witch. I like her a lot in that.
Natalie Mendoza played Always Keeping Her Head Sasha Fleetwood. She's Australian, born in Hong Kong by parents of German and Filipino background, and one of 6 artistic siblings. She has a huge musical background and has appeared in Cats, Miss Saigon, 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, Les Mis, and Sweet Charity. She played the role of Imelda Marcos in the 2014 London production of Here Lies Love. She also originated the role of Arachne in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, but had to leave the production after she was injured backstage, one of the many injuries that plagued this infamous production. On screen, she played China Doll in Moulin Rouge, Hotel Babylon, The Descent and its sequel, and Annette. Back in the 90s, she also formed the band Jackson Mendoza with her sister Rebecca. They had the hit song Venus or Mars. Paul Ritter was guy who likes to play with his soldier men, Harry Fleetwood. Born Simon Paul Adams, he took the stage name Ritter because there was another Simon Paul already registered with the Actors Union. He studied with the actor Stephen Mangan, and the two remained friends until Ritter passed away from a brain tumor in 2021. He appeared in The Libertine, Hannibal Rising, Quantum of Solace, Nowhere Boy, Vera, The Game, No Offense, Chernobyl, and Friday Night Dinners. His final role was in Operation Mincemeat, which was released posthumously and dedicated to him. James Clay was our flame-spinning mute Simon de Quetteville. After studying at the Drama Centre London, he made his first screen appearance in My Weekend with Marilyn. Since then, he appeared in Whitechapel, Doctors, Holby City, Life in Squares, and most recently in an episode of Wednesday, and in the miniseries The Long Shadow. He really liked his fire dance.
He was having some fun there.
Yes, he was. Louisa Klain was something sexual Amanda Harding. She made her on-screen debut in the series Judge John Deed and would go on to appear in Island at War, Casualty, Doctors, and Holby City. In 2018, she took on the role of Maya Stepney on the soap Emmerdale. According to Wikipedia, her storylines including splitting up with Dr. Liam Kavanagh, her rivalry with Leanna Kavanagh, her relationship with David Metcalf, and grooming his son, Jacob. After the grooming story, apparently there was nowhere else for her character to go, and she left the show, but not before receiving the 2019 Inside Soap Award for Best Bad Girl. Murray Melvin was amateur roof climber Bentham de Ketville. He got his big break in the 50s as a part of Joan Littleford's legendary theatre workshop company at the Theatre Royal Stratford East. There he played roles in transformative productions of A Taste of Honey and The Hostage. He would go on to appear in the film adaptation of A Taste of Honey, for which he won the Best Actor award at the 1962 Cannes Film Festival. He had important roles in Ken Russell's The Devils and Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. He also appeared in Let Him Have It, The Krays, Little Dorrit, and the cult series Star Hunter. He passed away in April 2023. Carrie Fox was large and in charge Betty de Ketville. She's actually from New Zealand and graduated from the Toi Whakaari New Zealand Drama School in 1987. In only her second on-screen role, she received much acclaim for starring in the Jane Campion film An Angel at My Table, playing the author Janet Frame. She would work with Campion 20 years later in the film Bright Star. Now, in 1994, she starred in Shallow Grave, directed by Danny Boyle and co-starring some guys named Ewan McGregor and Christopher Eccleston.
Never heard of them.
Yep, this was a huge cult hit. She also appeared in the 2001 film Intimacy with Mark Rylance. In that film, she performed real sexual acts with Rylance, which actually her husband wrote about how it made him uncomfortable. Rylance said that he regrets doing it, but Fox has said, I absolutely have no regrets, and it's one of the best pieces of work I've ever done. She won the Silver Bear at the Berlin Film Festival for it. Now, she's appeared in Country Life, Welcome to Sarajevo, Cloud Street, Intruders, The Dressmaker, and most recently in Bay of Fires. And in any other podcast, she would be the village star because she's an actor of great skill, empathy, and nuance. But this is Welcome to Midsomer. We're giving it to the guy who played Weirdo Twins. Yes, our village star just had to be our man doing double duty as the twins Julian and Toby. It's James Callis. Born in Hampstead, he graduated from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts in 1996. The same year, he won a Jack Tinker Award for Most Promising Newcomer for his appearance alongside Bob Hoskins in the play Old Wicked Songs. He also had his first on-screen appearance that year in an episode of Murder Most Horrid. In 2001, he got his first big break, playing the best friend to the title character in Bridget Jones' Diary, a role he would return to in both sequels. But let's be honest. A lot of people are going to know him best for his role as Gaius Baltar in the 2003 reboot of Battlestar Galactica. That show ran until 2009, winning a number of accolades and earning Callis a place in all-time sci-fi nerdom. Seriously, if you've never watched it, it is a great show, and he is great in it. Now, after Battlestar ended, he would go on to appear in Eureka, Austenland, CSI, Key and Peele, Gallipoli, Castlevania, Picard, Blood and Treasure, and he's going to be in an upcoming episode of Slow Horses. I think he's clearly enjoying himself a lot in this dual role, having fun playing, going big for both roles.
I just love the way he does both of those characters. So different, and I wasn't sure the first time if it was, are those real twins or is it the same guy? Does he have a twin brother? That's actually very, very, very much identical. But, I'll have to stick him out at, Comic-Cons and get a signature on my t-shirt now.
Yeah, that's called stalking. I love that his, one of his big choices was how he's going to do the voices.
Mm-hmm.
And, for no reason that I could see, Julian's voice is a few octaves lower and scratchier than Toby's. Toby's, very,
yeah.
And I could just see his says, well, I'm going to do one like they were punched in the throat, and I'm going to do the other one like they were punched in the face.
I love the way he's playing with the whole evil twin trope, which is the evil twin. I mean, he really leans into to Julian, and Julian is a jerk.
I mean, that's the thing is, he's a jerk, he's very arrogant, and he's, again, he's pushed to be what his mom has, always pushing him to be. But is he evil, or is he just a jerk?
Yeah.
That's a fine line.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about which one is the evil twin at the end.
Exactly. Because at this point, we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with the rest of The Dark Rider. And we're back. Let's look at the second half of The Dark Rider.
Isabel, what did you mean by saying Toby should be a man for once? You seem to be making some sort of comment there.
Just stating the obvious. Toby's a big drip, red as a flannel.
As opposed to Julian.
Julian was an awful man. Yes, he was a man.
Well, Ludo is suitably freaked out and is convinced that the rider is coming for him. He refuses to leave the manor on the day of the reenactment. John is freaked out that Sarah will be on site and tries and fails to talk her out of it. Meanwhile, Jones heads over to the stables to talk to Amanda and discovers all the stalls are empty. From illness, Amanda claims. He asks her if she has a gray horse like the kind the rider uses, but she says nope. At the reenactment, Sarah gives a speech about the importance of historical accuracy. And then things immediately go sideways as both sides are pushed to capture each other's flag. Things get worse when real soldiers hired by Sasha enter the fray and win the battle, giving the Fleetwoods Longmeadow. Over at the hall, though, Ludo is kind of wandering around when someone he recognizes knocks on the window. Ludo goes to the front door to let them in, but when he steps outside, no one is there, and then he's killed by a falling gargoyle. The family's shocked, with Toby crushed by grief. Oops! Poor choice of words! However, any of them could have left the battle in the middle of the chaos to commit the murder. While Jones interviews the Fleetwoods, who are shocked over another death, Barnaby tries to get Simon to talk, but no luck. It seems like Simon's 5-year silence is a medical oddity. He should have come out of this by now, so why won't he talk? Izzy also tells Diana to stop acting like a tart because she propositioned Harry Fleetwood, and Diana fires back that she knows the family's big secret. That night, Toby asks Betty if she will leave him. Seems genuinely happy when she says she won't. Joy turns to fear when the rider appears to point a finger at Toby. Barnaby tries to keep Toby safe by keeping him in the library, but he's also using him as bait. With police stationed around the hall, Barnaby stands outside with some huge binoculars to watch the whole scene while Toby takes a phone call. A delivery truck blocks Barnaby's view, and when it leaves, he hears a motorcycle start up and drive off, so he gives chase. Meanwhile, Jones discovered Amanda lied to him. How dare she? She used to have a gray, but she sold it off and didn't tell him. He demands to know who she sold it to. He then runs into Barnaby in his pursuit, and they both head to the old mill where the horse had been kept and the biker was headed. They are too late to stop the biker from shotgunning someone from behind and disappearing. Barnaby and Jones find the headless rider getup and a piece of armor that took the shotgun blast. They also find Sasha hiding and a video camera recording the whole scene. She first claims that Simon tried to kill her, but then gives the first reveal. She's been trying to help her husband in her own way, by dressing as the headless rider and riding around trying to scare people off. But when she accidentally scared Bentham into dying, she planned to stop, until somebody started blackmailing her to keep being the horseman. Barnaby and Jones rush back to the hall to look for Simon, who has disappeared. They find him tied up and gagged in the priest hole. They gather the family, and here's the second reveal. With Bentham's death, Toby realizes he has an opportunity to become the successor. He recognized the Dark Rider's horse and learned that Amanda had sold the gray to Sasha. He's the one blackmailing Sasha to do what he wants, dressing as the rider and pointing at the people he planned to kill. She unwittingly lured Julian into the trap, and Toby was the one who lured Ludo outside and then pushed the gargoyle on his own father. Sasha pointed at him to try to get him to leave her alone, and then called him to lure him into an attempt on her life that she would film. All of this was his way to ensure that Betty stayed with him. She's the only person who accepts him for who he is and is terrified to lose her. He also tried to frame Simon and has been tying him up in the priest hole for a long time. Why would he do that to his own son? Because he's Julian's son. Julian slept with Toby's first wife at Toby's request. That makes Simon the rightful heir. So he had to get him out of the way too. As the episode ends, Toby is taken away and Simon starts to speak again. But this isn't the end, as multiple people report they've seen the writer in the last half hour. Oh, Midsomer. Talking about the killer? Well, love again seems to be the motive.
Just as in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Just as in half the episodes we've talked about.
Well, yeah, too.
It does seem to be the great motivator for this show, right?
Yeah, and probably in real life.
Yeah. Although those that's a lot of crimes of passion, and
Yeah.
usually, and these are all pretty well thought out.
Hmm.
What do you think of Toby as the killer?
I will say that they do play fair with the clues in this one, with Toby being the killer.
Mm-hmm.
There I can't when I was watching it again, I couldn't find anything that they left out, which we've seen sometimes with them. You see those that someone is up on the roof doing something, and later you realize, and they don't say it is, but later you realize, oh, that was Toby like loosening up that gargoyle to plant on his dad's head. You see him get in the car with Sasha. You don't see their conversation, but you do know that they would have had to have talked about something, because they're there together.
Well, I gotta be honest, I thought that was going to turn out to be like Sasha and Toby were having an affair. Or that maybe it was the Toby and Julian did that thing where they change places every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
which is a part of an evil, part of the evil twins sort of a stereotype. Also, I do think twins do that every once in a while just to create mischief.
I don't know that many identical twins in real life.
The few that I've heard, and I've heard every once in a while that they do. So it's just, but it's to play pranks, and it's
Yeah.
can you tell the difference?
Yeah, and not to sleep with somebody's wife and get them with child.
Yeah. So this goes to the whole wife thing. First of all, Toby killed his wife, right?
I don't know. I think it's implied that he could have, because he moves awfully quickly to thinking, I can murder the rest of my family.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those weird dangling ends where I think it's kind of he goes from mild mannered to evil pretty quickly, and that's the one thing that I had the hardest time with is just so he just decides I'm going to kill these two people off the bat, and his excuse is they were so mean to me, which was so pathetic. That muling that it was just such a pathetic childlike response.
And I think in a way it was not the real reason. I mean, he's put up with that for a long time, but it's a way he justified it to himself.
Yeah, he sincerely loved Betty. He thought that Betty was there for the money, and maybe she was. That Betty is pretty blunt, and she loves him in the sense of it's like loving your dog.
Yeah.
But I just kind of felt like that was the one thing. It was I would have loved to have seen where evil Toby kind of came from.
Mm-hmm.
Has it always been there? He's been very good at hiding it. And I think if we had found out he killed his wife years ago, then that would have been, I think, that would have been kind of, because he's also been traumatizing Simon for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a lot of manipulation when you go back and watch it. He's manipulating a lot of things.
Yeah.
By pretending to be this meek, mild, nice guy.
Yeah. But that the sadism to do that to someone who's technically supposed to be your son, but
who's legally his son. Yeah.
He's never treated him as such.
Yeah.
You think mom respects him now? He killed two people like a man.
Like a man. I don't know. The way she just kind of turned away from her when he said mummy, it was like, it was definitely, she didn't take any responsibility for her actions in all of this.
No. The dysfunction in this, at the end of it, he probably was a horribly treated child by all these people.
Mm-hmm.
I am not shocked with Izzy and Ludo as his parents and Julian as his brother that he turned out to be manipulative and psychotic on some levels, because that's what this family would raise. I hate to say it, Simon's probably a psychotic now as well. They could easily do an episode where they go back to the hall and Simon's the killer.
Yeah.
Because he's going to need an army of therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, how much did you love the reenactment going off the rails?
As someone who's been to a few Civil War reenactments, I thought that was very fun. The way it just and poor Sarah just trying to keep everything historically accurate, and it just immediately falls apart.
It was a very much a gentleman. There is no fighting in the war room.
Oh yeah.
Reaction.
Yeah.
But also Joan's face watching the whole thing of just like bemusement.
Yeah.
Because he knows. Because I think this is the first time I really kind of put together that Midsomer, like all the villages of Midsomer are basically Springfield from The Simpsons. They're idiots.
And every once in a while, they'll all gather together as a mob to hunt down Homer.
Yep.
But yeah, I enjoyed that aspect a lot.
Because you said you've gone to some of these reenactors, and you said that something about the ramrods.
Yeah, technically, and I did notice that they do use the ramrods in the muskets during this reenactment, and since it's being filmed, it kind of makes sense. But in real life, in real reenactments, they no longer use ramrods. They just mime using the ramrods by putting in the powder because too many people got injured and, in fact, killed by people forgetting to take the ramrods and shooting their muskets at somebody, and those ramrods go flying because they are projectiles. In reenactments, there are no actual projectiles, obviously, in the muskets, unless you forget to take your ramrod out.
Interesting. By the way, in weird sort of, as we've commented that Midsomer Murders is almost the Murder, She Wrote, is a murder show equivalent. They also did a big episode involving Revolutionary War reenactment.
Yeah. It has been something that has been used on other mystery shows because it is an easy way to kill somebody. Yeah. Personally, it would have been much easier for Toby to just say, "Hey, Ludo, come out here," and then shoot him.
I mean, in essence,
but we would have lost. Yeah.
It also would have been pretty. It just seemed to be pretty easy. Hey, Ludo, come this way. Oh, okay.
But we would have lost that great shot, that absolutely amazing shot of his prone body with the gargoyle on the head.
Yeah, let's do a quick strange kill on this. First of all, you got the twofer, sort of smacked in the chest with a flying log, which is, I think, the first and only time you'll ever see that in Midsomer. Mm-hmm. And then, hit in the face with the falling gargoyle. It was face to face. Like, when you see the body, it is literally like Ludo's face is smushed under the gargoyle's face.
Yeah.
And you get the classic line, he did know what hit him.
Yeah. It is just such a fantastic shot, and it's funny, and it is quintessential Midsomer.
Yeah. Quick question on Julian's death. How did they know that Julian would stop in that exact spot?
I think that was Sasha was supposed to lure him there, but how do you predict when somebody's going to stop? That was an awfully Rube Goldberg contraption just to kill somebody.
I mean, the thing is like they should have cut the rope while he was riding there because they wouldn't have known that he was going to stop at that exact. But he literally, it's almost like they pointed a big X on the ground and he just landed right on top of it.
Yeah.
It seemed it was a bit lucky.
It was a bit lucky. Yeah.
Let's spend a moment talking about the Fleetwoods.
Mm-hmm.
I did say that I thought she was having an affair with Julian or maybe Toby, but she really does love her husband.
Yeah.
Goes to great lengths to prove it.
I think he does love her as well because of the way he reacted to Diana's very strong flirtations with him, which was very uncomfortable. It's like, go away, but not actually saying that.
A lot of strong-willed women in this episode. I mean, as Fleetwood says, he does warn Jones, like, do not get in a woman's way.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, I do love that I guess he's a broker or a trader or something like that, and or maybe like what do you call those things? The hedge funds.
Oh, hedge fund manager. Yeah,
something like that. But he had all those computers in the background. But if you listen, they're making all those beeps and boops like a 60s sci-fi TV show.
I guess somebody in the Foley department thought those computers are way too quiet.
Beep up, boop up. It's like, what? Is he NASA?
1960s NASA.
Yeah. The relationship between Sasha and Amanda is never like they're friends, they're roommates. It's implied that maybe something else. Did you feel that they were being strangely coy about Amanda's sexuality?
They were, and this is a series that has gone to the evil lesbian murder well a few times already.
Yeah, even though they weren't evil lesbians.
No, they weren't. It was like, oh, they're not evil. We can't be so specific about it now.
But there's so many implications that she's gay,
Yeah,
and they never talk about it.
yeah,
And I just thought, or they never just name it. And it reminded me a little bit of when we talked about They Seek Him Here, where they like talk around abortion. They
yeah,
do everything they can to not say the word abortion, but then they put a note in there with abortion.
yeah, yeah.
Nowadays, I don't think they would. I think they would be much less
Circumspect.
circumspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays, they would just call it as they see it. But I just thought it was like
Yeah.
that was interesting because it's not. This episode's only 10 years ago. I don't think they needed to be that coy at that point,
No.
especially for a show that's comes out and says incest
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, with a show that has a lot of incest, that is about murder, that
Mhm.
is, and that has a lot of, adultery going on, and a lot of rather, dark things to it.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like I actually had a rare comment or two in a Welcome to Midsummer group sorry, Midsummer Murders group on Facebook because someone complained when they saw The Witches of Angels Rise and they had to turn the show off and they were very disappointed that this family show had devil worship or non-Christian worship in it. And there was a bit of a pile on, and I made a joke about the guy who's like, the witchcraft is bad, the multiple murders is good.
Yeah.
But it turned into a discussion where a lot of people were kind of like going, how would you why is this a family show with all these murders?
Yeah.
And I have to make the argument, I think Midsummer Murders is a family show. Even with the murders, kind of going back to like Murder She Wrote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was a Sunday 8 p.m.
Yeah.
show. That is prime family time. Every network would have told you that back in the 80s. That is where you put your prime family show.
Yeah.
And I think Midsummer Murders, as a sense, even with murders and the weirdness and like we make fun of the incest tropes and all that stuff, the detectives, the bad guys always get caught.
Mm-hmm.
They're always punished for their crime.
Mm-hmm.
The detectives are always happy family men.
Yeah.
With relatively stable home lives. They're not brooding. This isn't a show about getting lost in the darkness. This is a show where they come in, the people commit a horrible crime, and they're caught and they're brought to justice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a pretty family friendly message.
Yeah. It's different from, say, Bergerac, in which John Nettles' character Bergerac was a recovering alcoholic and at times relapsed. And there were times when there was a particular person, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the photography episode, who gets away with some things, not murder, but she's a thief and she gets away with stuff. And it's all played off, and yet the tone on that is still very much in the family-friendly mystery series tone. This is not The Wire. This is not NYPD Blue. There is no the murders. I mean, we do see a little blood every now and then, but it's not a really gory show.
They have commented that they have toned down the violence in recent years. Even Neil Dudgeon has said in interviews that it's not as violent as it used to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Their messages also tend to be very much about compassion,
Yeah.
tolerance, acceptance. The detectives tend to be very empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want, like, if you're going to narrow like a family show as something that's like a G-rated Disney thing, then no, Midsummer's is not a family show. But is this a show that you could watch with your kids? I think you could.
Yeah.
Like, you might end up having to explain a couple things to your kids, But at the end of the day, there's not stuff in here that I think it's just like even the nudity, like even the few times they've had nudity, it tends to be like Mark Williams' butt. I mean, it's not.
Yeah. There are a
It's
few sex scenes that you do see, but they are not graphic, and it's all very missionary.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's like they're family. It's a family friendly show that sometimes is a very special episode.
Yeah, it does get a little dark, but it does end always with the murder coming to justice, and at times it does buzz the line of whether they are justified or not.
So, what do if you think Midsomer is a family show or not? We would love to have that discussion because I think it's a fair one. Going into detective work, a lot of interesting Barnaby and confusing Barnaby stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we really saw like an angry Barnaby a few times.
Yeah.
He shouted at the uniformed police officers who let Ludo die.
Yeah.
He told Lady Isabel to shut up.
He told her to shut up and sit down, and I think she enjoyed it.
Oh, she did. She's like, that's a real man.
Yeah.
He called Simon an idiot at one point, which not cool.
Yeah.
They had that great line at the top though when someone's telling Barnaby that they saw a headless rider. That he goes, "Were they drunk?" It's like he just goes, "Drunk or stoned?" Joseph goes, "I was on duty, sir."
That is a classic exchange.
Great one-liner.
Yeah.
And I think we found out two tidbits here about Barnaby. Number one, I don't recall them mentioning that he has a psychology degree.
I think they may have mentioned it in the first episode, but I can't remember. And we'll talk about that when we do that.
It was very passing.
Yeah.
So maybe it mentioned, but it's not something that gets brought up a lot, even though he is constantly having to talk people down.
Yeah. He does use that psychology degree a bit in this, and in a lot of the episodes. And in a way that Tom Barnaby had kind of a natural way with him in doing that, as he did with the young man in New Age Place.
Yeah, the New Age episode.
Yeah.
That's the relationship between John and Simon, and then Tom and that I think his name is Ian.
Yeah.
They had echoes, except Tom could actually get the kid out of his shell. At best, John got Simon to not put a knife to his throat.
Yeah. He eventually started to talk. Yeah.
But the other thing we discovered in this episode, and it only gets mentioned once, and it doesn't get played up at all, Barnaby's afraid of horses.
Yeah.
Clowns and horses.
Clowns and horses. He did not like the circus at all.
No. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if a clown on a horse came near him?
Fortunately, there were no horses at that circus.
But that takes us into home life and the whole argument about Sarah and John sort of crossing paths in Midsomer. Did they never talk to Joyce?
It's like, seriously, how many bodies did Joyce discover?
You're gonna be involved in some cases.
Yeah. And here she's just doing a voiceover for the battle that goes out of whack.
It was nice to see her having that. It was just very much a comic moment because I think we all kind of knew what was going to come.
Mm-hmm.
But I also kind of loved her giving John the refresher.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this gave Fiona Dolman a great moment to exercise her comedic chops, and I thought she did that very well. And I love the scene between Sarah and John, where he's telling her that basically that he's uncomfortable with her being there because of the murders, and she's like, I'm not a fragile person. And the way she tells Jones that she is an autonomous person, which was great. But she is, you get, and this is the second season with them, you get that she is a very forceful woman who has her own thoughts on things and it is not afraid of being who she is.
Yeah. I kind of loved that they gave that refresher. Obviously, all our UK listeners, you all know everything about the English Civil War history.
Just like Jones did.
Need that refresher. However, for non-UK viewers, this is a very syndicated show. We might have needed that little refresher.
I love that John was able to pull out the years of the Civil Wars out off the top of his head. The way that a lot of Americans would be able to pull up the years for the U.S. Civil War.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, some of us would be able to do that. Some of us paid attention in history class.
It was
Eric.
1861 to 1865. I know that. I know a lot of people who can't find Canada on a map. So
Okay. It's America's hat, people.
let's sum this up. What is your final thoughts on the Dark Rider?
I think this is a fun episode. I do like that. For me, I think that it plays fair. I think it is one that didn't have any real dropped issues, except for possibly the first wife. I think that could have been done a little bit more. But I like this episode a lot. I think it's fun. It's got an appropriately scary tone to it. It starts with a dark and stormy night appropriately. And yeah, I give it a good, strong, solid rating on this one.
I love this episode. It's like I had forgotten large chunks of it, but in rewatching it, the writing is so good.
Mm-hmm.
The one-liners that just drop throughout it are so entertaining. There's like strong comedy bits. There's like really good suspense, a good mystery, and I just love the fact that no one bats an eye to the idea of like, yeah, there's a headless rider just riding around this area. Mm-hmm. It's probably someone in an outfit. It's like, yeah. Nobody bats an eye, and that is the classic quintessential Midsomer. It's like weird stuff happens, and it's like, yeah, that just happens here.
And I think there's some really good cinematography in here. Both just the way they shoot the Nebworth house is gorgeous, but also just some really fun. The way the flag ripples in the wind as he's following, that is a great shot. The shot of the gargoyle on Ludo's head is just a great shot. There is just some beautiful things in here. The way they shoot the reenactment is really good too.
They had fun with this episode. This is one of those episodes where you can tell everybody's having fun.
Yeah.
Everybody's enjoying themselves. There's even with the dramatic moments, you could tell James Callis is having a ball.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that Carrie Fox does such a really great job with her character. She is blunt, but you still have sympathy for her. She ends up being the most sympathetic character, other than, I guess, Simon, in here. But through most of it, you think that Simon could be a murderer.
I think that just kind of goes to the level of actress that Carrie Fox is, that she is someone who is so good at naturalistic, and like her scenes are all super grounded and realistic, and everyone else is kind of playing this weird over the top game, and she's just like a steady Betty.
Yeah.
And her performance is what makes this whole episode work. It's not James Callis gets the fun, showy role, and he's the star. But the fact is, if everyone's playing a heightened game, if every single person is playing a heightened game, it goes off the rails. You need someone to be the anchor, and Carrie Fox is the anchor in this episode. She is the one that is grounding all of this. Her reactions are all of our reactions to this family is freaking nuts.
Yeah. And they really need a lot of help in keeping themselves in that house, because otherwise it would be up for auction in a moment.
Yep. That's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank you all for listening to us, and if you have anything you want to discuss about the Dark Rider or Midsomer Murders, please feel free to email us at gmail.com. Also, we are still soliciting you guys for your personal Midsomer stories for our upcoming second anniversary show. Please, please, please let us know how you fell in love with Midsomer. When did you start watching it? Were you a kid? Is this a new thing? Is this an old thing? What's your favorite episodes? What's your favorite detective team? Feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com with all this. Go on to our Facebook page. On one of our, we have some posts for it. Put it there. We want to hear it all. We want to include as many of these for our special second anniversary episode. Just if you email us, just make sure that you say that we can use your email on the show. As I mentioned, you can find us at Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook. We're also on Instagram and Threads. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on YouTube, where we are uploading all our old episodes. So please follow us in all these places. We're getting nice feedback on our YouTube channel. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. It really helps people find us. Also, tell all your friends about us. We're going to be back soon with a new episode, and we hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, faulty Civil War reenactments can be murder.
Especially if you forget to take your ramrod out of your musket.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act Fair Use Exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art were designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space.